On today's episode of the Military Money Manual podcast, we are here to talk about why you should invest for retirement. And this is about a reader question we got that balances a husband's desire to spend right now and kind of live for the moment, enjoy life, versus the wife wanting to maximize their retirement accounts and that friction between the two mindsets. So we're just going to chat for a few minutes about why saving for retirement and sacrificing maybe a little bit now for future you is something that we think you should consider. When you have what you need and you're comfortable in life, it's hard to think about needing something in the future. And it's hard to know how much I need. It's hard to know where I'm going to live or what my tax situation is going to be in 20 or 30 years. It's hard to know if I'm going to stay in the military till retirement or not. And so a lot of these things build up to people just thinking, I don't want to save, or it's too hard to save and I don't know how much I need to save, so I'm not going to save up at all. But a lot of military families face this friction between saving for the future and enjoying their earnings now. And we also have the potential to earn the military pension if you stay in. And so some people might also think, I could just live off my pension and be fine.
Yeah, there's a lot going on with this question, Jamie. And you could be wrestling with these same questions as an individual, right? You don't have to be in a relationship with someone. And usually in relationships, there's the person who's more of a saver than the other one, and the other one is more of a spender than the other one. It could be the same person too. You could also have one person that both enjoys savings and enjoys spending more, and the other one just enjoys going with the flow. So it could be different depending on the couple. But really what we're talking about here is how much do you want to set aside or send to your future self, right? That's how I like to think about it, is when you don't spend all of your income today and you save some of it and you invest some of it, essentially what you're doing is you're sending a payment to your future self. And depending on how long you invest that money for and what kind of assets you invest that money for, by the time your future self receives that payment, it could have grown multiple times and beat the insidious decay of inflation along the way, such that like the dollar that you invest today, depending on your age, but 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, you might receive $10 instead of a single dollar that you saved.
The first reason that saving now is important is because of compound interest. And compound interest takes time to kick in. But if you look at wanting to make $1 million, and again, there's a debate, is $1 million enough or in retirement or not? But just say you wanted $1 million when you turn age 60, the dollar amount you would need to invest monthly if you start at 20 years old versus if you start at 40 years old is drastically different. We're talking like a couple $100 a month versus several $100s a month if you start early. So when you take advantage of compound interest by starting early, it makes it less impactful, or it makes it less painful for you to have money saved for retirement. And that allows your money to get invested and work for you kind of automatically without you having to be the one that's working, which really gets to the heart of what do you want to do with your life? Do you always want to be working long hours? Do you always want to be working for a boss that you don't like? Do you always want to be in a job that you can't control where you live or your hours? Or one day, might you want to volunteer more, spend more time with your kids, your grandkids, take more vacations than you're allowed to in your current job? And the way that you enable all of those things is by taking advantage of compound interest. Now, I don't want to discourage you if you haven't started yet. That's okay, because the next best time to start is today. But you need to start early, whether that's today or early in your career. Starting to investing automatically will take advantage of the compound interest so that you're growing and that money is available for you to do what you want to do as you age, which hopefully at some point is not working full-time in a job that you hate in a location that you don't enjoy.
Yeah, and just in case you're listening to this episode and you're a complete beginner to investing, you might hear compound interest and be wondering, okay, what are we talking about there? But essentially what it is simple interest would be if you put $1,000 in, getting a 10% return, you get $100 a year. But compounding interest, you would get $100 that first year, and then the entire $1,100 would then grow by another 10%. So instead of earning $100, you would earn $110. And that continues on for the rest of time, essentially. And your money starts growing faster and faster. And so all of a sudden, when you're making you have $1 million in there and you get a 10% return, you just made $100,000 in a single year. And that kind of growth it's hard to see at first. And a lot in the beginning, it's really your savings rate that's going to affect how quickly your wealth grows. And by savings rate, we just mean what's the difference between your expenses and your income. So if your income is $80,000 a year and you're spending $60,000 a year, you have a $20,000 difference there, and you could start investing and saving that difference and sending it to your future self and allowing it to grow faster than inflation. That's going to allow your future self to benefit from, you could say, the sacrifices, but really it's just like the intelligent not consuming of every dollar of income that you earned as a younger person.
Another benefit that we have in the military is the Thrift Savings Plan, which is a great retirement plan. It'll be the equivalent of a 401k if you hear that for a civilian employer or any kind of civilian investment book or advice. And in the TSP, if you joined after 2018 or you opted into the blended retirement system, you get a match. And so you're going to have that automatic 5% with some caveats. We explain that in our TSP course, but you get that 5% match after a couple of years of service. And then the government is automatically contributing 5% into your retirement account as long as you are also contributing 5%. And they want you to do this so much to take care of you and your family's future needs that every January, if you turn it off, they automatically reinvest you back 5% in the most applicable life cycle fund, which I love. It cracks me up because that's how important it is. And if you want to have limited options of your healthcare or a nursing home or where you live or what kind of house you can be in when you're old or what kind of doctor you can go to, then don't save anything. But if you want to have a health span that is fun and you're able to walk around and take vacations or choose which type of doctor you go to, choose which kind of clinic you go to, choose what your nursing home might look like one day, then the TSP is one of the ways in which you can save so you have options when it comes to retirement on top of the pension that we get if you stay to 20.
The other thing here, Jamie, is you can walk it back well before you're talking about like nursing home, right? Like you can save, and this is what inspired the Financial Independence Retire Early movement or the FIRE movement, is because essentially what they did is they looked at the standard American retirement savings rate, which is, 5 to 10%. And they're like, okay, so that means you're working a 40 to 60 year career before you can live off of your investments. And the way they calculate that is the safe withdrawal rate of 4%. So if you have $1 million invested in a stock and bond fund, you can withdraw 4% a year off of that. So $40,000, and that $1 million will last for essentially forever, for your entire and the rest of your lifetime without going below zero. In fact, in most scenarios, it doubles or triples by the time you no longer need it, by the time you expire. And so that's a great inheritance to pass on to your children, if you have any, or to a charitable organization, if that's what you desire your estate to go to. But it's more than just retirement. It's financial security. So Morgan Housel, in his book, The Psychology of Money, talks about saving just to save. And the reason that we do that is because life is unpredictable. And that's why in the Dave Ramsey baby steps, his first objective is an emergency fund. You have to build an emergency fund. And retirement savings, it's really just an extension of that emergency fund. And it's saying that I'm not going to spend every single dollar that I receive today. I'm going to set some of that aside because I don't know what the future holds. And no one knows what the future holds. And so it starts small with a $1,000 emergency fund, but then it starts to grow and build to the point where you have other funds, whether it's your TSP, it's your Roth IRA, it's the equity in your house, it's a taxable brokerage account, it's a high yield savings account, it's certificates of deposit, whatever it is, wherever you're saving your money. And it's for different purposes, it's for different goals. But at the end of the day, the entire point of saving and investing money is so that one day, if your income gets reduced, you can supplement it, or hopefully you can save and invest enough that you don't have to have regular income anymore and you can just live off of your investments, or you can save up enough that you can pay off your house and significantly reduce your expenses. So by starting that habit of not spending every dollar that you earn and not living paycheck to paycheck, you set yourself up for financial security and financial success.
It's a great point, Spencer, because I think it could even be as much as you don't know what expenses you're going to have out there. So it's not necessarily just retirement or just early retirement, but maybe say one day you would love to buy F-150 Raptor. And so you need 120 grand or however much those cost to set aside. And so you can just have money that gives you options. And I think if I could stress like one thing about saving, it is that it gives you options, whether it's to stop working full time, to go to part time, to take a job that doesn't pay as much, to not have stress when you're transitioning out of the military, whether at retirement or 4 years or 10 years. Maybe you don't want to work for a couple months when you first get out of the military. Maybe you take a mini sabbatical or mini retirement. Maybe you want to work for that not-for-profit organization that's not going to pay you quite as much as the defense contractor that's offering you a great salary. And so by having savings, it just gives you the opportunity to do things that best align with your passion, your values, your desires. Maybe it just sounds fun to you. And it allows you to also make memories with your family, whether it's having a boat that you rent or maybe one day buy, or vacations with your family. My family growing up, we never did vacations. And I really love vacations now. And it's a significant portion of our budget. But it's nothing, I don't regret it at all. We love it. We love the memories. We love getting to see different places and experiencing different things. And some other people that don't do vacations, don't do charity, and just spend all their money are like, why would you ever do that? It's like, well, I like experiencing things. I like making memories with my kids. But because we have that money in savings, it gives us the option to choose. And while your choice might be different than mine, and my choice might be different than Spencer's, and vice versa, that's totally okay. But it's what we've set aside and what we choose to do. And the whole time we're balancing this all with the desire to live and enjoy. So on the husband's perspective of we want to live, Spencer, let's talk a little bit about some ways where we might want to prioritize living now, maybe spending a little bit more now, and how we can bring those into a balance. So it could start with maybe reverse budgeting. Maybe once you've met your savings goal, then you have a bunch to spend.
Absolutely. So that's what I advocate for, because I think the stats are pretty harsh on people who actually set a budget and stick to it. I mean, it's something like, I think it's less than 10%. I really like the reverse budget, Jamie, because it sets the priority, which is saving and investing. And so you do that first, and then you spend whatever's left over. And then it completely eliminates all the guilt and the shame that we tend to have around spending money, because you're like, oh, I should save some of this. Well, you already did. You already did the hard part, and you automated it. So it wasn't a decision you had to make. It just happened. But this is the constant debate that everyone in life has to go through, is how much do I spend now and how much do I save and invest for the future? This goes back to, ancient times where, if you were a subsistence farmer, you might have to decide, okay, how much am I going to set aside to eat this year, and how much am I going to set aside to replant for next year? And that's essentially the same conversation that we're having now. It's just updated to modern times. And it's how much am I going to spend? How much of my salary, my income am I going to spend today? And how much am I going to invest? Now, unfortunately, in our modern capitalist society, we've gotten to the point where not only can you spend all of your income, but you can spend all of your future income too. And more. Yeah. And more. And the problem there is you get behind and you create this stress cycle, and you fall into these debt traps where all of a sudden you have spent not only your entire paycheck, but you've spent many of your future paychecks already, but you're now in the future, and those spending decisions were made by your past self, but you're the one who's suffering. So your past self was the one who got to enjoy that $80,000 Ford F-150 Raptor, but now your future self is the one who's having to pay for it. So what I like to do is reverse that and say, look, I'm going to sacrifice or make the conscious decision today that I am going to send some money to my future self. And then when I get to the future, to be my future self, I can look back at my past self and I can say, wow, thank you. That was awesome that you sent me that money. But I hope that you enjoyed life along the way. So this is the constant debate, Jamie, that we're all going through, is how much of my income am I going to spend today? how much am I going to save? For some of the optimizers listening to the show, we've thrown around some pretty crazy savings rates. When I was on active duty, my wife and I were saving, depending on the year, anywhere between 30 to 50% of our take-home pay. And usually we're saving 100% of her take-home pay. And, that's not normal in American society. Most people are spending all of their take-home pay and all of their partners' take-home pay as well. Where's the balance there? I mean, I think it definitely depends on the person, but I would say 10 to 15% minimum, you should be saving and investing for retirement. And if you want to achieve financial independence early, you need to start cranking that number up closer to 25 to 50%. If those numbers sound unrealistic to you, that's completely okay. And if you start running the numbers and you're like, well, okay, if we maintain our current lifestyle, we are going to be able to retire in 30 years. That sounds okay to you? Then great, keep doing that. But if you look at that number and you're like, I don't want to retire when I'm 70. I want to retire when I'm like 50 or 55. Then now's the time to start adjusting your lifestyle or cranking up your savings rate such that that becomes achievable, that becomes possible, while not sacrificing your current quality of life.
Spencer, I would clarify maybe that you might have to make temporary sacrifices to your quality of life, especially if you're already behind. If you're already in significant credit card debt, let's say, or you're living to paycheck, you may need to cut back on things like eating out or something like that temporarily just to get ahead again and to start that savings. So a temporary decrement in your quality of life may be required to realize your future why. I think the really hard thing here is when one, like in this reader question, or this listener question, when one spouse really wants to save and the other one's not as keen on it, is that one spouse sharing why it's important to me. It could be maybe the mom that's returned to the workforce but doesn't want to stay in the workforce and wants to cut back to part-time, or the dad that wants to take that job at the nonprofit, like I mentioned earlier, or maybe one parent wants to go to part-time, or the house you want to start growing a family. And so one of the partners is going to stay home. And so you're going to cut back to one income. But having the flexibility to do that depends on, one, how much you make and how much you spend out of how much you make, and then how much you've saved of the difference. So our friend Jeremy Schneider from Personal Finance Club, like his 2 simple rules: spend less than you earn and invest the difference. And it's as simple as that some days, where that difference that you have between how much you spend and how much you make is going to set your future self up for success. Whether that is reducing your income so one spouse can stay home more, like I said, or retiring early. And it could be anything in between. Sharing for the spouse to share the why it's important to them will help you set up a spending plan that can determine, hey, we're comfortable doing 15% or 25% or 35% or whatever of our savings rate. But understanding why it's special to you or why it's important to you is going to be a great first step here.
I think the other critical thing here, Jamie, that a lot of people ignore when they say like, oh, I'm just going to spend all my income. I'm not going to save for retirement because I'll have Social Security or I'll have a military pension. But that's like outsourcing your locus of control. You're saying, I'm going to rely on this external agency to keep sending me a paycheck or a pension check on the 1st and 15th or the 1st of every month, when you can be independent. Like you can be self-sufficient by saving and investing. Like you can, and that's why we call it financial independence, because you are not dependent on any other outside agency. Now, you're still part of society, obviously, and like you still need global capitalism to continue to function as it has for the last 500 years. But I think that's like the bigger picture if someone is talking to me and they're like, oh, I don't invest for retirement, I'm going to just rely on my military pension plus VA disability, plus, one day I'll collect Social Security. And it's just like, you're just outsourcing all that control when you can take back the power. Like you can save and invest in yourself and for yourself while still maintaining a reasonable quality of life. Like just because you're paid $100,000 a year does not mean you need to spend $100,000 a year. Like when you look around the United States, for instance, there are lots of families living on $50,000 a year. There are lots of families living on $60,000 a year. So when someone says, oh, I could never live on X number of dollars a year, I just want to be like, well, how do you think these other people are doing it? Like they are living on of that. So clearly it can be done. You're just choosing not to do that. And that's fine. You don't have to choose to do that, but don't say it's impossible. Like, don't say that, oh, nobody can do that. I mean, there's extreme examples out there. One of them is Early Retirement Extreme. And I'm pretty sure he lived on like $14,000 a year for like 10 years or something. Now, that is absurd, right? Like, I don't know. I mean, he was literally eating like lentils and rice for like every meal. And I think he lived in RV.
Not worth it.
Yeah, exactly. So for you, Jamie, not worth it. For me, 100% not worth it. I'm not going to do that. But when I was in 03 and I was making six figures a year, I looked at my $20,000 Mazda that I had bought and I was like, this car is fine. This car is great. It's got Apple CarPlay. It gets me from point A to point B. It's safe. The air conditioning works. I'm not going to upgrade it to the $80,000 Ford F-150 Raptor. I mean, I'm sure it's a cool car, like, or whatever you call it, truck, but I was not sacrificing any bit of quality of life because I was driving a Mazda and not driving a pickup truck.
Each family has those things that are important to them, which you can prioritize in your budget, which is what I love about personal finance is you can tailor it to what you care about. When I think back to earlier in the podcast when we were talking about why save, I think stress is something that I failed to mention. The stress around money that a lot of military families experience. And if you look at the statistics of how few Americans can save or have money to cover an emergency, or if they lost their job, would they be okay? The stats are really scary. And I think if that means that many Americans are hurting with money, that means that probably many military families are probably also hurting with money. So if you don't want to be stressed with your money, and way back at the beginning of the podcast, episode 1 or 2, I think it is, I had just had a $2,400 fuel thing happen to my Honda Pilot at the time. And it was okay because we had an emergency fund. But could you imagine if you had to put that on a credit card at 28% interest and it took you, 6 or 8 months to pay off? That's why we save, is to cover life, because life is going to happen, whether it's a car bill or, you move out of base housing and they hit you because of stain on the carpet that's like $600 and I don't have $600. Now what do? They're going to take it out of my paycheck. Now I can't cover my deposit at my next base. And so we save to take away the stress, to give us options, and to meet the goals and priorities that our family chooses to have.
A lot of people out there, Jamie, they get discouraged, right? Because we throw around numbers like $1 million or $2 million for retirement. And they're like, dude, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. Like, I am not going to be a millionaire one day. And I just want to, I think it was like Henry Ford said, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. And if you say that I'm not going to be a millionaire one day, I'm like, yep, I guarantee that you're not going to be a millionaire one day. But if you say, well, wait, how does this whole investing for retirement thing work? How does the TSP work? You start asking questions, you start looking into it, you start looking into savings rates. And especially if you're getting an early start, I mean, I think the numbers are crazy, like $250 a month if you start when you're in your 20s, and you'll be a millionaire by the time you're 60 with a reasonable rate of return on that. And, some people will say, well, $1 million by the time I'm 60, that's going to be worth $250,000. And you're not wrong. Inflation will be slowly chipping away at the value of the US dollar over the next, couple decades, as it has for the last 100 years, basically. What I want to encourage you to do is don't let that discourage you, because $1 million 40 years from now is not the same as $1 million today. Because I guarantee you, if you don't start saving and investing, you'll have $0 40 years from now. But if you start saving and investing, and it doesn't have to be a whole lot of your paycheck, and you have $1 million from 40 years from now, you're going to be a lot better off than the person who did not start saving and investing today. And for the people who are like, well, $1 million isn't going to be enough for retirement 40 years from now, maybe not. But by building that habit and starting that snowball, like Charlie Munger likes to talk about, the first $100,000 is the hardest. And once you're past that, then compounding interest starts, churning away, and your net worth just grows faster and faster. I've seen that in my own life, Jamie. I've seen that in your net worth growth over the last couple of years, where you do reach a tipping point where all of a sudden, you might see stock market fluctuations day to day. Not that we're recommending you check your portfolio day to day, but you might see the stock market move up and down more than your monthly paycheck. And in a month, you might see a stock market return that's more than your annual salary. Once you start seeing numbers like that, then you're like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy that the value of my portfolio can fluctuate that much in a couple of weeks or in a month or in a year. If you can do that earlier in your life, like by the time you're 30, 40, or 50, by the time you actually need that money because you're not earning an income anymore in your 60s or 70s, you're going to be even better off. So I really encourage for those people who are like, oh, $1 million is not going to be enough for retirement. 40 years from now, it's like, maybe not. But I'll tell you what's definitely not going to be enough for retirement. And that's if you don't save and invest anything. I highly encourage you to start the habit and start building your financial future and giving yourself options. And that's really what you're doing, because let's say you get a really early start and you start saving and investing in your 20s. And let's say you go all the way, you go 20 years and you earn a military pension. The person who has a military pension and $1 million in their TSP is going to be a lot happier than the person who has a military pension and $0 in their TSP. So start contributing, start saving and investing, and however you have to do it, whatever reason you have to find to motivate yourself to do it, find that reason and then set up an automatic system so that the computers handle all the decision making and all the investment options. And so that you only have to make the decision once, you set the percentage, and then you go and live your life.
And like we mentioned before, it's not just about that retirement piece, although we'd love for you to have a healthy and a secure retirement. But what do you want to do next year or 5 years from now that you could start saving for? And maybe your family has never been able to afford a vacation before. Maybe you start that. Maybe you aren't sure if you're going to want to work full time after separating from the military, and you start that. So it doesn't have to be full retirement. It doesn't have to be saving for when you're 70 and making sure you can afford a nice nursing home. It can be a lot of things before that. I would encourage you to think about it and try to communicate the why it's valuable to you if you're married and there's any friction there. If you are married or you're budgeting with a partner or a spouse, I would encourage you to compromise on some things where you might not. If Spencer and I were sharing a budget, which we're not a couple, but if we were sharing a budget and he really wanted a new car, but I didn't care about a new car, but I really liked going clothing shopping or whatever. So we would find a way to like give him his car money and me to go clothing shopping money. And that's what my wife and I do. And that's what Spencer and his wife have to do, is you each have things that are slightly different to you, whether it's like, Starbucks or Target or vacations. It is very rare for both spouses to agree on the priority for every item. And so when something is important to the husband, you have to give into that sometimes at a reasonable amount that you can agree to. And then likewise, when something's important to the wife, you give into that at a reasonable amount that you can both agree to, that you can both live with. So even if it's not something that you would choose yourself, it's like, could I live with spending $50 a month on this item that my spouse wants, even if it's not something that I choose? And so those are just some ways to compromise. But at the root of this, again, it's just giving you options, both now and way out in the future. And we appreciate the listener questions too. So you can reach out to us on Instagram at Military Money Manual, or you can send us an email, podcast@militarymoneymanual.com. We're grateful for all the listeners. If you got value out of this show or any others, please give us a 5-star review and share it with your friends. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Military Money Manual podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others find the show, and we really appreciate it. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
The views and opinions presented here are those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views of the DoD or its components. Reference to any commercial products or services does not constitute DoD endorsement of those products or services.